Rob's Child. We're going to cover Chapter 3 today of Security Analysis. In no way is this to replace this book. This is, if anything, an advertisement. I hope you can read it along with me and discuss this with me in the comments. And also, none of this is investment advice of any kind. So let's talk about Chapter 3. It goes about sources of information. The goal of the chapter is to go over the more important sources of information. We'll dive right into the points. I'm going to try to make this video short because this chapter was not super illuminating for me. I think it's kind of antiquated in most respects, but there's a few little gems I think that we can still get out of it. So he talks about the three main data points an analyst should care about are the terms of the specific security, the company, and the industry. The chapter talks about, this was written pretty soon after the SEC had come to be, and they were still making rules, and rules since then I'm sure have been updated and changed for the benefit of the owners of securities. Maybe not. Maybe I assume too much. But let's go over the main points. So he talks about a lot about railroads, the types of reports that are released. Apparently, in this era and before this era, a lot of information was kind of hidden from people that own securities, and the SEC kind of fixed that to some degree. In the 1930s, he mentions that some companies wanted their sales to be private because they claimed it would be detrimental to their companies. He later goes on to mention, in his experience, most of the time it's not going to cost the shareholder money to go to court to demand certain information be released. Most companies are willing to answer any questions that a security holder might have about the company that they own, in the case of stockholders, as an example. So let's go into that part real quick. Stockholder. So when you're a stockholder, one great point I got out of this chapter was that stockholders are not only owners. Yes, if you own the stock of Tesla, you're actually an owner of the company. It's hard for a lot of people to really grasp that concept, but you are indeed an owner of the company. And if, for example, if you were to buy all of the shares, you would own the whole company. You could do anything you wanted with it. You could fire all the officers. You could shut down all the factories. You would actually own it by owning all the shares. And the number of shares that you own is the amount that you own of the company. And that usually represents, I assume you probably know, it represents votes that you have for how the company is run. And that'll happen every so often as to who you can elect to be as the officers of the company that make the important decisions for the company, and then other things can get voted on as well. Okay. So yeah, I guess before the SEC they didn't have such stringent things. And it was very hard to get the information to begin with. But then when the SEC came around, you could at least, as a shareholder, say, I demand, this, and you can go to the SEC, you can look at the prospectus. Today, you can just go online. Everyone has access to these things. So, a lot of this information from this chapter is it's very antiquated. The one area I kind of wanted to bring up was China, and how I find it interesting, so many great investors today, including ones that are, big followers of this book, that use this as their backbone for investing, that are very bullish about China, that are very interested, especially like it seems like most of these very experienced investors don't have much of a problem with it. And it kind of just makes me think about how stockholders before the SEC, had similar opaqueness about like not being able to see what's going on in the companies. And we've had a lot of that recently with Chinese companies, some problems coming up there with Luckin Coffee in particular and some real estate companies. But it seems like most people are not as concerned, and the risk seems worth the reward. I'm in that camp right now. I'm not crazily educated in this industry yet. I'm doing my best to learn as much as I can, but when I'm looking at the value of these companies versus the risk and reward looks pretty nice in China, even though there is that opaqueness that was kind of whittled away in this period, when this book was written in the U.S. So I kind of like thinking about that parallel there. But yeah, he talks about the sources of information. He talks about like I think even like a Britannica encyclopedia in one spot, trade books, trade journals, he calls them. And we still have journals today. We still have, and we have plenty of financial journals, and then specific industry journals too, talking about different industries. And so it's an area I probably should be more invested in. I think maybe I'm 10% of my portfolio is in uranium right now, and I should probably know about more of that sector. I am excited about it just because of the free information that I was able to acquire from other people. And this book kind of advises against that. They even mention in here, use original sources, not summaries or transcripts. He's like, be careful where you get your information. I think that's probably the most valuable takeaway from this chapter. Be careful where you get your information from. Ideally directly from the company, directly from what's going on in the industry. So I think that's all I want to really talk about regarding this chapter. Was there any other notes that I took? It talks a lot about railroads. I think that'll do it. Again, like, all these balance sheets, all these things, they apparently used to be a little harder to get access to. Now you have, second to second access to the price of securities live online. I mean, if these authors were around today, they'd probably be amazed at how available the information is that we have it. But yeah, again, if they were alive today, they might still hold some of these points to be important. Be careful where you get your information from. I think that's the long and the short of this chapter. Hope you enjoyed Chapter 3 of Security Analysis. See you next time. Rob's Child.